There's a million stars tonight, one is loaded, like a fallen angel ready to explode. Look into these eyes, try to see through my skies. Catch a glimpse of
Man, well, listen, we had a great interview with Casey the other day, and it really, man, it just took me back to what a great time we had there in Lyons. And for folks that don't know Jason and I and Megan sort of met. We told a part of the story with Casey, and we'll get into the story about how everything went down with us. But we started playing music together, and I kind of wanted to play a clip.
Stars love have fallen from the sky. 100,000 dreams gone, 100,000 sighs, 100,000 whispers, promises and constellations changed, our stories rearranged, and darkness fills the skies. Must not be afraid now. This will not be the end. 100 million stars will be born to fill the skies again. You never are alone, love. I swear I'm by your side. There's very little light. Auf Wiedersehen, adieu. Good night, my love.
That's right.
Different.
So I wanted to play that so we could sort of, go back to that place in our minds. And that was a concert that Jason and Megan and I did for Central City because of their, like a lot of opera companies that had seasons planned, everything was canceled. And so Central City Opera decided to start doing a concert series in the summer, utilizing that beautiful courtyard right next to the Opera House. And they asked if we would do something sort of like, hey, can you guys come and sing a few arias and things like that? Well, by that point, we had already started playing music together, Megan and I, and we just not too long before they asked us, we met you. And so I don't want to tell it from my perspective. I'd like for you to sort of fill the audience in on how we met in Lions and how all that shook out.
Well, so we actually met officially for the first time. We probably had seen each other around a few times, but you and Megan were walking back from, I think you just got back from a trip to South Carolina, or were finishing up your quarantine. Yeah. And I was out working in my yard, and you guys were walking back from maybe a Black Lives Matters march or movement here in Lyons. And that's where we met, and we started chatting, and you're like, come on down sometime. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll come on down. And I probably about 2 weeks later, it was a Saturday, I remember, and I had worked all day and I was exhausted. And I get home and I ordered some food in, and Tara said, "We're gonna go down to Jen's house and listen to the opera singers." And I was like, okay. I was tired of doing it anyway, but like, okay, I'll go down there and I'll lay in the yard and I'll listen and it'll be nice. And like, I'll hear somebody sing. And as we're walking out the door, she's like, "Where's your guitar?" And it's like, "I'm not bringing it." She's like, "Yes, you are." So fine. So I grabbed my guitar and we walked on down to Jen's, to the neighbors, and sat in the yard, and you guys were singing a song, and then somebody, not me, mentioned, somebody told you guys that my guitar was there, and you're like, "Come on over here." So we started singing that night. And it was really just, it was a little bit of magic. It was just really sweet and nice and felt really good, and that's where it started.
Well, I remember at the end of that, we played for a while that night. And I remember at the end of that thinking, because as we told Casey on the last call, we were really intimidated by you guys because you're so amazing. And when you first started playing with us, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I've always been waiting for, because I can't play lead fills or anything, and I can't play solos, and I can't put that element into what we were doing. I can just play rhythm, and you just slid so perfectly into our little group there. And I thought, on a whim, I was just like, hey, man, we're playing this concert for Central City. Would you think you want to join us? And you were like, yeah, sure. And it was like, wow, so great.
Yeah, and I was, to be honest, I was a little surprised you asked, because it's an opera house, and I'm a more or less a bluegrass guy, and I didn't really know what the idea of the show was, so I was like, sure, but what's it going to entail? Are we going to be doing like songs like are we going to be doing something up big score and stuff? Working up the score. I will say this, and this is a little humorous. I studied music in school, and so I have a degree in music, but I've been doing bluegrass and old time country kind of stuff for about 20 years, singer songwriter things. And so I'm pretty ingrained in that community. And when somebody says, "Oh, there's these opera guys and they're singing a bunch of country songs," your first reaction is almost like a little bit of an eye roll, like, okay. And I would imagine it would be the same thing if an opera company said, "Oh, there's these bluegrass guys and they're going to come do some opera stuff for us." There'd be that similar sort of eye roll, and you're just. But then, coming down and hearing you and Megan sing, and just like, oh, there's the bass and the training, and you're obviously very, very skilled and great at opera, but there's more to it. It's not just, it's not a one-trick pony. Like a lot of musical styles and stuff, you can kind of get, pigeonholed into a one-trick pony sort of thing. You're like, oh, you're only a country guy. You're only a bluegrass guy. You're only a rock and roll guy. You're only a 50s rock and roll guy. You're only a metal guy. And it's I've always loved when genres can really cross into each other. And and actually, when genres cross over is where you get, progression and new styles develop. And I think sometimes, when we get into, because bluegrass and opera have very, very sort of narrow, hardcore demographics that really follow them. And they wouldn't necessarily cross pollinate, naturally. But when you get that, that's where you get more breakthroughs. And yeah, there's a lot of similarities, I think, in the community and the way the communities work. But yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. The audiences are similar in that it's a niche audience. People that go to bluegrass festivals, it's not, if I walked out into the street right now and talked to 10, 20, 50 people, if I asked them, when have you ever gone to a bluegrass festival? And I also asked them, have you ever been to an opera? We'd probably have about the same numbers. People be like, never been to a bluegrass festival, never been to an opera. But there's something, that niche part of it.
Yeah, and depending on who you ask, a majority of that population randomly selected and asked would like never go to either.
Right. They just wouldn't go. And so we have this kind of similar niche audience. But what's interesting about both art forms is they're both rooted in storytelling. Unlike, there are some other genres that aren't storytelling musical genres. These you can have pop music, they tell stories and things, but it's about hooks. It's about, a lot of stuff's about hooks, or kind of like popular music. It's called popular for a reason. It's sort of engineered to fit into this popular thing. But you have just like in opera and bluegrass, you have your traditionalists, you have your progressive people, you have all that stuff.
Yes.
And so there's so much, the more we talked and the more we, collaborated, the more, I always, at my core, I always believed that country and bluegrass music and opera are cousins. They really do go along. I used to, I have this show called From Opera to Opry, which the byline is, country music. It's supposed to be really snappy, and I can't even get it out. Country music can do in 3.5 minutes what it takes an opera 3.5 hours to do. But it's about the same stuff. It's about real people and their stories, and a lot of times there's a lot of tragedy involved and all that stuff. So, and I had this as a core belief, but it wasn't really filled out until we started working together and seeing that play out right there in front of us and with our fingers and our voices. One thing that is interesting is that we both, all three of us, sort of suffered from the pandemic in the same way,
Oh yeah, I think you and Megan and Casey and myself. Most definitely, because not just our livelihood, but our expression, our desire and need to entertain and to get our feelings out through music, publicly, if nothing else. Just that connection you have with audiences was totally gone. And I think a lot of people in our greater music communities, they've obviously really felt the loss, especially financially, but just that connection. And it was nice, even with my band, we hadn't been doing hardly much at all because we don't live in the same town. We can't walk down. We haven't been practicing. We haven't been doing stuff, and so that connection was sort of lost for us. And to be able to come home in the evening and then just walk down to your house and just play some just good songs and try songs out and just hang out, and it was refreshing. It was necessary and needed, and also a reminder of at the core what really brought us to music. Doesn't matter what style of music we're trained in, or what just the idea that it's still music. And a little bit of a tangent, but doing our performance at Central City Opera, incorporating a couple opera songs into a set that's very non-operatic. And I've thought this for years, but a good song is a good song, and in the right hands, can be performed or adapted to any style. And it's always nice to be reminded that to be open to new experiences, to new ideas, and yeah.
For me, it was a real example of the universality of music. It brought me back to the thing that got me involved in music in the first place. It got me back to my entry point.
One thing I wanted to say too is that you know, like listening. I mean, you and Megan are incredible singers, and I mean, you're not really braggarts or anything like that, but and you guys know you're good singers. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so many cool things that you've done. But hearing you both, kind of try or go back to a different style that I don't know if Megan was as familiar with as you are, but sort of coming back to your roots, like when you first started singing the country songs, because country is, I mean, popular radio country is different than what I think of country music. I think of country music as the old guys, Hank Williams and George Jones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Chris Christopher, so people that they're very authentic voices, maybe not super technically skilled voices, but authentic and a lot of feeling in them. Johnny Cash, I mean, all those guys, Willie Nelson, and country music is about like the expression. And before I even knew where you were from or like that, I mean, hearing you sing some just old songs, like the expression really came through. You could really feel it, and that got me. I mean, just that in of itself brought me out of my headspace of like, here's somebody who's a trained opera singer. Here's somebody who's a good singer who's singing other songs. You weren't just singing the songs; you were transferring them. You were being the song, and that was good for me as well, because then I was like, oh wait a minute, that also that's what country songs are about, but that's also what opera is about. It's that translating, that being that character, like really feeling it. And I was really sort of refreshed to be reminded about that. It just, because it doesn't apply to just things that I've done in bluegrass or country or what you've done in opera or anything. It harkens back to the musical experience and the expression. And it was very just, I think this culmination of the times that we're in and everything that's going on, all this kind of uncertainty, it was just like, oh yeah, it's just back to the root of what really is music and why we do this. No. I thank you for that. Thank you.
Well, just like when you're a part of a fantastic opera production, when I would be on the road and I would be a part of some incredible, like we did Glory Denied at the military base in Glory Denied is the true story of the longest held POW in American history, Colonel Floyd James Thompson, whom I play. And we actually did that opera on a military base in Des Moines for military families in there and for veterans and their families, with an amazing cast, and everybody was so in and committed and with it. And when you get to the end of that project, you don't want it to end. You don't want it to end. You want it to keep going. You would even as much as you want to go home, you kind of want to stay there and keep doing the beautiful thing that you were doing. And it never occurred to me that I would have that kind of feeling playing this kind of, and having the opportunity to play this kind of music, and to get back to my roots and to do that stuff, in a way that was so fulfilling artistically, that when we left Lions and when we left you and Casey, Megan and I have compared that many times since then to a death. It felt like, that we experienced the kind of loss that you do when you lose somebody.
Yeah.
And we've been, the knowledge, the only comfort is the knowledge that we're not done.
Yeah. We get to do more.
That the midnight crickets or mannequin feedback or whatever the heck we're going to call ourselves is going to ride again.
Yes.
And that has been a tremendous comfort. But it's still, and it's funny, we were talking about Megan earlier about how you didn't know if she was familiar with this art form or not. She definitely was not. She only knew, what I did sitting around the apartment every once in a while. I think especially when we first started dating, I had to show her, play my love songs for her.
Yes.
Pretty sure that's what did the trick. When she heard that Mickey Newberry, boy, she couldn't resist.
You couldn't resist all those horribly depressing songs.
This guy's really sad. But yeah, it was just the kind of experience that I got when I did the best opera that I've ever done. Yeah. And I got that experience sitting under a cottonwood tree on the front porch with my neighbors. And it was just outstanding, man. I miss you guys so much.
Thankfully we get to do some more of it.
Yeah.
You haven't decided, but when the date's gonna happen. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing much more of this. It was magical.
Yeah, we're going to. I know that I know you know this, but Megan and Casey have been writing songs together, and we have that. Now we all have our folder where we can
Yes.
collaborate. And that's kind of the cool thing about I've never been a songwriter. I always wanted to be, but poetry is not my thing. And the other day Megan just started writing stuff down. And what the cool thing about that is that that's your own. You get to be a part of the creative process from the beginning. Writing the songs. I mean, one song that you wrote, that Megan and I have sung a million times since we left, was Rocky Mountain Stars. And it was such a love letter to Colorado, to the Rockies, to whomever you're singing it to, that it just resonated with us so much. I mean, what are some of the frustrations you encounter as a songwriter? When you're sitting down and you got your pad or whatever else. I mean, people have all kinds of different ideas about what a songwriter goes through to get
Yeah.
that thing out of their head. What do you go through to do that?
Every songwriter is different. For me, it's trying. Maybe I tend to write in a certain styles. I'm a songwritery, bluegrassy country styles, but I don't really write in indie pop style or anything like that. And so I have that, but it's I think about the chord structure and the melodies and the lyrics and how they all intertwine and interplay, and then the ideas that trying to get. I may focus mostly on trying to get my lyrics and the poetry to what I want it to be. I stress that's what I stress on and probably work on the most is the lyrical content of a song, like getting that idea to flow, trying to find the most eloquent way to do it, trying to avoid cliches or kind of awkward or overused rhyme patterns. And I was actually thinking about this last night with working on an older song that's not quite done. But like are the lyrics, are they mature or are they immature? Does it feel like a young songwriter who's just starting out and just throwing words out and letting them be, or is it like you really putting the thought and the effort and time into those? And it can be super simple. Lyrics don't have to be complex. There's a great songwriter, Chuck Pyle, who passed a few years ago, was talking about songwriting at one of his shows once, and he's like, not every song has to be this powerful kind of strong point, like it has to have this make a super message. A song can be as simple as just chickadee, 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 chickadee. It can be just super simple and rhyming and playful. It doesn't have to be this extravagant thing. And it's kind of reminding, like, thinking about all these different you say you have this big bowl full of ideas. It's like you don't have to use all the ideas in the same song in every song.
Yeah.
It's like picking and choosing, and then finding out, working as maybe your art form is clay. It's like working with your clay to get the perfect sculpture or the perfect bowl or whatever you're working on. And it's a weird process. Every song is different. Every song has a life of its own. There might be a song that I would write that is maybe my favorite song I've ever written, but nobody else. It doesn't grab anybody else. It speaks to me. Or a song that I've written that I'm kind of like, this is all right. What do you think? And people love it. You never know. You never know how things are going to be received. And depending on what kind of songwriter you are, I mean, I don't really write songs for other people to perform and record. The songs usually are for me as my expression. I mean,
it's really interesting to talk about.
There's songs that I've written. Oh, go ahead.
It's really crazy when you talk about the sort of trap of profundity. We want to be so profound with everything we do. It's got to be profound, but not every emotional experience is profound. There's an enormous range of emotions that every human being goes through, and it's not so much. It's easy to go to the poles. Anger, heartbreak, ecstasy, joy. Yeah, you can. It's really, those things are very fertile. But the really difficult things I find are, when I'm building a character, for instance, is the nuance in between the poles.
Yes.
And I think that is, I mean, for me, is there a correlation between songwriting and sort of building a character in that way?
Well, very much so, because depending on what kind of song you're writing, you're building a character, or you're building an idea, or you're building an expression in that song. And so, if a song's obviously anger, then it's almost easier to write an anger song. But that may not, I mean, you may not just a straight anger character or anger expression isn't really a full, well-rounded expression of anything. What causes the anger? What supports that anger? Like, just so getting into like these sorts of things, and then that's where you kind of you can get into the poetry of it, of like how lyrics and words fit together that are smooth and eloquent and support this, but maybe take it from a different perspective, and not be cliche, and not be just you just wine, dine, rhyme, kind, like straight kind of just weird, because there's a lot of things that are super easy and obvious rhymes, and sometimes the obvious rhyme is the perfect rhyme for the song, and sometimes the obvious rhyme is the absolute last rhyme that should be used.
Yeah.
And it's basically just thinking about that. And one of my favorite songwriters is Jason Isbell, and he can emote, and he can communicate with his songs so well. And he's a songwriter, but I think of him almost more as a song painter. He really paints the song, so you can really see it and feel it that way. And that's a very tricky way to write songs. And it's a mark. I think it's who can really lay out the song in a way that you can really see it and feel it and hear it all at the same time. And we're just talking about the lyric aspect of it, because then you also have the feel and the groove and the chord structure and the melody, and how to make the melody go up and down. And it's okay it's okay for the melody to be super simple. It's okay for the song to maybe only have 2 chords if that's all the song really needs. Some of the best songs ever written are just a couple chords, or just a one chord groove, and it's learning where it's okay to say it's okay to do this. Because every time when I've been writing a song and I keep trying to throw more chords into it and it just doesn't work, and I have to sit back and go, you know what, this song keeps telling me not to do that. Why am I not listening to it?
I mean, simplicity is deceptively complex.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, especially even when just from an operatic standpoint, when we're doing the simple things, and it's really honest and true and simple, and, that is really hard to pull off. If you've got a bunch of elements and people around you and a big thing, it's easy to hold an audience's attention. If you have a bunch of window dressing and a bunch of people doing this, it's, oh yeah, well, you got nowhere else to look. But when it's just you on the stage with nothing else, well, that's simple and that's hard.
That's simple. And yeah, it's simple, and it can be super hard.
Yeah.
You're relying, and then it also, getting back to the simples, I think as a culture and as musicians, we tend to overcomplicate everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking a simple thing, and we're just like we're almost beating the simple thing to death. And then at some point we need somebody to go, you know what? All it is this right here. This is all you got to do, is just stop. Why are you doing all this other stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And when you stop doing all the other stuff and get back to what the simple part of it really is, you're going to express it and communicate it so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough lesson for us learned musicians.
Well, that's funny because, and I imagine, and just because I've talked to enough people in the world, and especially since I came from the country bluegrass world, that's where my first love was. And a lot of folks, I think, have the perception similar to an opera. They sort of think we're just born that way and it just happens, and it's not really, it doesn't have a lot of training involved. You just sort of, and it's great. And I think a lot of people think bluegrass musicians sort of just learn by sitting on the old porch and old grandpappy teaching us how to play things, and that's all. You just sort of come to it, And I think a lot of folks, that's true, but I don't think that people understand the incredible amount of scholarship and learning that goes into to producing bluegrass music. Like you have a music degree. It's not like you didn't get your music degree from grandpappy on the front porch. You actually went to school to study this music.
Well, I mean, I studied music in general. I just studied the breadth of it, and this is where I ended up finding the it's just what really ended up speaking to me the most, this kind of music. But I think that's very true. Any almost niche music, whether it be bluegrass or old time or old country, Celtic, like any of the Eastern European, styles of music, they're all very complex, and it takes a tremendous amount of skill to be good at these, and that goes for opera, for classical, I mean, it's, and I mean, it's obvious that you need a lot of training for opera and for classical and for jazz because there's schools been dedicated to it for centuries, but to maybe more folk styles of music, I've heard this so many times. Oh, you play bluegrass? I can play bluegrass. Blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, you roll your eyes and you're playing with them and you go, okay, let's play a real bluegrass song. And you go, and they can't do it. Mm-hmm. They can make fun of it pretty easily, but people don't realize that, just because you think it's simple and it sounds simple, that it's not quite tricky to play at times. Mm-hmm. It's any music, any style of music is very, it takes determination and time and effort and focus and years of practice to become decent at it.
I remember just when I would, Kitty Gornstein and Ryan Drickey were our roommates when we first moved into Lions, and I would play. And Ryan and I never got a chance to play. I was always gone, but every once in a while we'd play a little something. And Ryan does a lot of pretty complex stuff, and I thought I could just keep up, but I realized, man, the stuff that he's playing is as complex rhythmically with compound rhythms and extra bars and things like that as anything I'm doing in the opera world. And it was as sort of enigmatic to me to be able to just, oh, wait, there's an extra, wait, that's a five, wait, that's a six. And then, oh my, we're back to a 3 bar. I'm confused, And it does that. You can't just, it's not just like Michael rowed the boat ashore. I mean, you have to, in order to get your mind around these things, it takes a lot of study.
Yeah, and that goes for all styles of music. It takes a lot of study. A lot of study.
There is this thing in American society, especially. We love the overnight sensation. You look at American Idol or America's Got Talent or all that stuff. They don't want to see the story of the person who dedicated 25 years of their life to something and then got good at it. They want to find the 17-year-old prodigy or the 50-year-old person that came to it for the first time late in life and sort of does it okay. But there's no sort of homage given to the people who dedicate their lives to making music. We want the nice, flashy story. We don't want to hear about the guy who had to sit in his room for 6-7 hours a day trying to get things right.
Or playing at the local coffee house for years and years and years, just honing a skill and never being heard. Mm-hmm.
Playing in those places will teach you how to pull people in as opposed to just shout at them the entire time.
Oh, totally. And that's part of the beauty of the experience too, is learning how to communicate effectively, in a way that's also honest to our individual selves. And it's called paying your dues because you're paying your dues. Our culture wants, like you said, wants the overnight sensation. They want to see who's never been heard of, and boom, all of a sudden everybody has heard of that person. Yeah. And you don't have the 30s and 40-year-olds who are just who've been working at it diligently for years and who have built their talent because they put so much energy into it. You don't want to hear those stories. No. Or it's the commercial backing of the industry that doesn't allow those stories to flourish.
Yeah.
But we're in changing times, so we shall see.
We shall. One thing you said earlier that really flipped one of the opera relays in my mind was when you were talking about songwriting and you were talking about how you start with the text. You start with the lyrics. You have the lyrics and they sort of inform the chord structure and the melody and all that stuff. But you start with the poetry. And it's so similar to the way, not only to the way opera is composed, because I know a lot of, modern opera composers, and I see them in their process. They get the libretto, and then the composer reads it and soaks it up, and then, things start falling out of the poetry that they then put into music. And for us as, like people that are executing that vision, we are told from a very early age, you start with the text. You start with the text.
Yeah.
Then you can put all the other stuff on it. But if you just start with the melody and try to, bang through it and just sing it as much as you can, you're really missing the color of the piece, because you're not really connected to what you're saying. In an opera, we have to spend a lot of time in the text, primarily because a lot of times we're not singing in a language we speak first.
Yeah.
We're having to translate it, and then translate that poetry into English, and then that's just this first step. You got to figure out the emotional and how that, when it's said in that other language, what it sounds like and what it feels like, and try to get the cognitive dissonance between you translating in your mind to try to get your mind in that place where you're actually saying those words in another language in a way that a native speaker would, and setting them and singing them the way a native speaker would. And so we have that same impulse back to the text, back to the root, back to the entry point into that story.
Yeah. And I would think more so with the opera world, because you have so much effort and study and focus putting on just learning what that song is even about, and then taking all that information and then internalizing it so you can really feel it and then bring that expression out, authentically.
Yeah.
It's tricky. I think, in my world, we have less to do because everything's in English or some version of English.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, for the reason why I love singing opera in English is because when I'm singing to my audience, the words that come out of my mouth are going bam right on their faces, man. They don't have to go, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be doing comedy sometimes, and the joke will happen here, and the laughter will happen over here because the audience has to read what the joke was before it happened, or the laughter will happen before the joke happens. You're like, no, okay, never mind. And so, I guess the thing that I missed about opera was that instant connection, that sort of registering of things, and that's one of the things that gives me so much pleasure about making music with you, Jason, is that we're able to do that together. Boom. And not only, and of course for us, it was just the 3 or 4 of us and, neighbor Don, and Tara and Jen next door, and Kyle and Julia across the street. We were able to sort of, do a little, that was our audience, really. But
yeah, our community was our street community was our audience. The street's right up at it.
Yeah, it's right out the door there. I want to ask you a question about sort of traditionalism versus progressivism in your industry.
Okay.
Us as opera singers, there's always a big, in the opera industry, not just singers, but composers and directors. And there's this constant tension between people who want to move the art form forward or, innovate and do things like that, and the traditionalists who want to say, it should be done this way, no matter what. If it's an opera that happened in the 19th century, you need to have 19th century costumes or 16th century costumes. It's got to be, just like they said, and everything has to be done a certain way. And any deviation from that is some sort of affront to the art form. Is that something that you guys experience in the bluegrass community as well?
Most definitely. Yeah, because Bill Monroe is the father of bluegrass, and it's a very distinct style. And it was sort of a forerunner to rock and roll. Really, it had the high energy. It brought elements of Irish and English ballads. It brought in the blues feel from the South. And Bill Monroe kind of took all these things that he had, old time fiddle tunes. He brought this stuff all together, and it came up with this bluegrass music. And then that spawned a whole bunch of copycats, which he initially hated because he felt like they were trying to steal his music. And he eventually became beloved because he realized it was more of an honor than thievery. but yes, but there is that vein of the style of music that Bill Monroe created, and the traditionalists think that it should all that's what bluegrass is, and that it's narrow, and not that they don't like other types of bands that are similar that have been influenced by that, but the idea of what traditional bluegrass is, and that's there's a definite strong audience that thinks that should stay the same, and now but as musicians are and how we tend to do, we generally aren't influenced by just one thing. Mm-hmm. And so we bring our influences of other things in, and then that kind of broadens the idea of what the tradition is. So the idea of traditional music over the past 60 or 70 years, according to Bluegrass, has been expanding, not without hiccups and tensions at festivals. And there's some festivals will only have traditional style bluegrass, and some bluegrass festivals have hardly any traditional type of bluegrass in it at all. And this debate's been going on since the beginning of bluegrass of what is bluegrass. And as a certain sect has tried to keep it fairly narrow in what the traditional mind is, that audience, that demographic has been getting older, and by the nature of how life is, gets smaller. Mm-hmm. And if you adhere to that too strictly, then you lose what the music is, because it dies out. And so there's debate there. So there are young kids, there are rock and rollers, there are country guys, there are guys coming from the opera world who mm-hmm. like bluegrass and be a part of this, because this community is great. And so it expands, and to some things that aren't really recognizable as bluegrass musically, but have the same instrumentation as a bluegrass band would have. And so mm-hmm. it's great, because it really helps progress and propel the music forward into the future and bring it to wider audiences. And when the wider an audience is, you always have that opportunity for that audience to say, maybe they're seeing the infamous String Dusters, which are a bluegrass band, very progressive, or Newgrass mm-hmm. Revival, the first really progressive bluegrass band, or Green Sky Bluegrass, which is kind of a rock and roll bluegrass band. Maybe they're coming in at from these wide angles, and they hear it and they get something they like, and that brings them further and further in. So they go through the circles of from progressive bluegrass, from progressive way I hear it, and they get tighter in it, and they learn about how to get to its core. And I think as musicians, I'm talking about musicians now, because we have a tendency to want to learn about our music. So we want to learn where it all comes from, and so you can get to the root of it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there is this tension that goes on. IBMA, the International Bluegrass Music Association, has been kind of dealing with this for the past decade or so, of how to expand this this audience and this organization to be inclusive, so that the music doesn't get too small, so the music the community can support it and get larger. And it's where I think over the past few years I've seen it kind of starting to expand out, getting away from some of the stringent old white rules and letting more come in, and really all it does is make the music better. And that goes, I think opera has that to some, but there's also you have modern composers always in the classical world, so they're always pushing those boundaries as well. And I think every musical niche, every style has that. Yeah. Some of it, I think some styles are more prone to being accepting of that than others. And yeah.
Well, I know that myself as a bluegrass fan, as somebody who loved bluegrass music, because when I hear bluegrass, I hear my upbringing. When I hear bluegrass, when I hear that sound, it takes me back to playing in my church, because we had a bluegrass band in our church. It was our music in our church. Our preacher, who's are now disgraced, he's dead now, died in prison. Our preacher that we had, his whole family played music, and I still keep in touch with his grandson and everything else. He's good buddies, and when I hear that music, it activates something in me that's familiar. But as that, my experience with it was always traditional, and I was I would be the kind of bluegrass fan, if I was a hardcore bluegrass fan, that I have a real hard time with hardcore traditional opera people, because I'm always trying to get them to step out of that and like expand, because I'm a musician in that art form, working in that art form. I'm very familiar with it. I'm always trying to like innovate and go to the next level and try to open the tent and get it bigger. But one of the things that I encountered, like, as I got older and met more people from the genres that I loved, they have that same impulse. But me as an audience member, I was often an anchor or a drag on that innovation, because I only wanted to hear Bill Monroe. I only wanted to hear Ricky Skaggs. I only wanted to hear those guys. I don't want to hear any of this hippie, progressive stuff, man. Don't be putting no weird chords in there. I want it to be 1-4-5-1, Yeah. But now that I'm a little older and I got my perspective's a little broader, and especially since I've met you and Casey, and it's kind of intimidating for somebody who doesn't understand the sort of more innovative, more progressive, less traditional stuff, to sort of venture out into that, because it makes you have to sort of like get out of your comfort zone and allow yourself to enjoy something that's a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think that can be tricky. And I mean, even for people of us who have been in our style for a long time, sometimes you get set or stuck in a way of how you've been doing it forever, and starting to step out. So my band, we're all influenced by lots of music. We've all listened to Blue Canyon
Boys. There we go.
We've listened to all sorts of styles of music. We come from different backgrounds, and on our latest album, we did a Warren Zevon song, and it's a really pretty song. Gary brought it to the band. But it's about heroin addiction, and it's blatantly about heroin addiction. Not really a subject you hear much about on bluegrass stages. But we were like, we're going to do this song. It's really pretty, and we started doing it, and we were playing it out. And we're curious, like, how is some of our audience going to respond to this? Because we have some fans who are very hardcore traditional fans. They really like what we do. And so we were at a gig one day, and we were playing this song, and there was one of our, seemingly very traditional, very, very narrow bluegrass fan was there. And we're like, okay, we're gonna play this song. Well, after our set, he comes up to us and he goes, "What song is that?" And we're like, "This is Carmelita by Warren Zevon." And he's like, my favorite song that you guys did forever was "Where the Soul of a Man Never Dies," which is an old gospel song. He's like, "I think this is my new favorite Blue Canyon Boys song." And when we did that, we were like, okay, it was just a little lesson in that just because we think something may not be accepted or by our maybe our cliche or hardcore demographic, doesn't mean that's necessarily the case. And it's just nice little, because it's a song it's very blatant about what it is. And and then this man who was a fan of ours and who was watching us perform for 15 years, for that to become his new favorite bluegrass song of us, it was very telling.
I mean, one of my signature roles is Joseph DeRoche in Dead Man Walking. It's a show about the death penalty.
Yes.
And if you know the show well, you can understand that it's not about the death penalty. Really, it's about redemption, forgiveness, all those things. The death penalty is just the framework on which it's hung. But when you do a show like that, in certain communities, you think, well, they're not going to be too much into this. And the first time I did it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Other states are out there trying to abolish the death penalty. Oklahoma's putting in an express lane.
Yeah.
And the producer, Kostis Protopapas, when I first went to him, I was like, we were sitting in a bar once, and he was like, I'm kind of conflicted. I really want to do this piece, Dead Man Walking, but I just don't. It's Oklahoma. I'm not really sure how my audience will receive it. And we talked about it, and I was like, you got to do it. It's super important. And I literally turned to him and I said, "And I'm your Joseph DeRoche." I knew the piece well. I'd never sung the role. Like, there's nobody that can do it like this, all this stuff. And I sort of put myself out there in a way I never did before. And he took me up on it. And then the reality sunk in. I was like, I'm going to be doing this death penalty opera in Tulsa, Oklahoma, man. They're going to come. They're going to be protesting and all kinds of stuff. They're going to boo us off the stage. That wasn't the case at all.
Yeah.
The audience went crazy for it. And so there's these predispositions and these preconceptions that we have about our audiences, or about what people are going to enjoy. And half the time, we are totally wrong.
Yeah.
Because I had all these ideas about what people in Tulsa, Oklahoma would think about this. And I was wrong, 100% wrong.
It's good. It's a reminder for us to it's okay to get out of our comfort zones and also not make assumptions about everything all the time.
And you can trust your audience, man. I mean, that's the thing is like, audiences are smart. They are.
Yeah, and they'll come up and tell you what they like. They won't always come up and tell you what they don't like.
Yeah.
And so that's a good, that's a good thing to keep in the back in your mind when you're a performer. unless it's blatantly obvious that what you did was something that somebody's not gonna like, then they'll let you know.
Yeah.
That mistake.
Well, I can tell you, Jason, that the experience that I had that I've had playing with you has been up there. We all have those that sort of that top echelon of musical experiences that even when we're not having them, we're thinking about them because it gives us so much joy and inspiration. And this is definitely one of them, up in the top, man. And wow. I know that we're going to be doing this again, and we're going to be collaborating. But I can't wait to get back to that point. But I want to express to my community out there that consider themselves just opera singers, and that I know that there are a lot of folks out there right now who were as constipated artistically as I was. That they had this blockage. You couldn't get past it, and there was nowhere for it to go. And because, we decided like, hey, it's not just about doing exactly what we do. It's just doing the thing, making the art with other people, creating. I would tell my community, and I know that you'll give your endorsement of this. If you can't do what you want, do what you can until you can do what you want. And you may just discover that some of these other forms and these other things it doesn't mean you have to leave and quit doing what you're doing, but it may bring a different layer. It may bring a different perspective, and it may expand your palette of what you think is possible. And I would encourage anybody out there that's an opera singer or an opera musician or some sort of person that feels like that the whole world is closed to them. It's not. You just may have to reassess what it means to perform and what it means to express yourself artistically.
Yes. And if nothing else, it makes you a more well-rounded person and musician.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else you want to tell these opera folks about before we wrap up here, brother?
That I'm looking forward to maybe getting in front of some opera audiences and bringing a different experience. You and I have talked about this and a potential of doing some shows together, but putting together something that is that offers a different type of connection with an audience, and I think it could be something really special, and so I'm looking forward to what lays ahead.
One of the things that opera and bluegrass have in common is that at the core of what we do, and when we do it in our purest form, it's acoustic.
Yes,
it's acoustic, and that means that there is and for me, I think there's an unexplored country, an unexplored palette that is ripe to be explored, and so maybe that could be one of our next steps too. They've combined bluegrass and other forms before, especially theatrical forms. There's a very famous Oklahoma going around right now, and it's accompanied by a bluegrass band.
Okay.
And so there's no orchestra. It's the bluegrass band is on the stage with the performers, and they're always part of the action. It's really revolutionary. And of course, when I saw it the first time, my head exploded, and I ran around with my hair on fire for about a week. It was so amazing. And so I don't think that it's a bridge too far to speculate that we could do that with opera as well.
Yeah.
Jason, I want to thank you for coming on, brother. I miss you so much, and I know Dallas is going to be the recipient of one of these experiments that we've been doing, and I can't wait to get together.
I'm excited.
You,
Yeah.
Casey, and maybe sing some of those new songs we got in the process
Yeah.
going on.
I got a handful going on right now that I'm working on. So we'll have to do some new songs, some old songs, and do a couple of opera songs as well.
Yeah. Now, if folks want to find out about your band and your songwriting, where would they go?
BlueCanyonBoys.com is our website. We're obviously not performing much right now,
but there's recordings.
There's recordings, and there's various things on I have on my Facebook page. I put up some songs that I'm writing and little snippets, and that's the social media stuff.
Yeah.
Instagram for me, Jason Hicks, or at El Beardos is on Instagram and Facebook.
El Beardo, ELBEARDO.
With an S.
Is what?
Yeah, ELBEARDOS.
Oh, El Beardos.
Did you catch it?
Got it.
Yes. So yeah, Facebook and our website for Blue Canyon Boys, and there's some YouTube snippets of me and the band out there. So yeah, come check us out.
You'll also be able to see the Midnight Mannequin cricket golf cart team at some point.
We're gonna go with the Park Street Patties.
Park Street Patties or something. All right, brother. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you. Good chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to next time we get together and do some singing and playing.
Right on, my man.
Oh, wow. If I'm somebody new, but you'll be sorry if you do. You'll never find a love so true. For all I ever loved was you. All I ever loved was you. You broke the heart that cried for you. I wasted all my tears on you. For all I ever loved was you. Fire rings and diamonds too, but you'll be sorry if you do. You'll never find the love so true. For all I ever loved was you. All I ever loved was you. You broke the heart that cried for you. I've wasted all my tears on you. For all I ever loved was you. For all I ever loved was you. You ever had anybody at the end of an aria or an opera go yeehaw?